So we are live on LinkedIn. Today I have Scott Miller, who wrote the book Management Mess. And the last few hours have been a management mess for me. I've miscoordinated everything. I did a lot. Thank you for understanding. How's your day so far, Scott?
Just like yours. You're pre-forgiven. We're all there right now. Everybody's in it together right now.
Yeah. Cool. So what inspired you to write this book?
I've been in the leadership development industry for 30 years, 25 of which as a leader of people. I work for the Franklin Covey Company. We're the world's experts on leadership. And I realized kind of midway through my career that leadership isn't for everyone. Joe, not everyone should be a leader of people, right? Everyone should be an anesthesiologist or a commercial airline pilot. So I wanted to write a book that said, you know what? Leadership isn't for everyone. But if you are going to be a leader of people, you got to recognize it's actually fairly unrelenting. It's kind of unrewarding. It's a mess. But if you can own your mess, then you can move towards success. And so I wrote this book extremely well last year. And it's really given a bit of a voice to people that struggle with what isn't natural to a lot of us, which is leading people.
So what do you think a lot of organizations get wrong about leadership?
Well, a couple of things. I think they get a lot of right things done right also, right? I mean, leaders are the linchpin of the culture of any organization. People don't quit their jobs. They quit bad bosses and corrupt cultures.
Yeah.
What they get wrong typically is promoting the wrong people. In most organizations, the path to be a leader of people is to become the star individual producer, the best, most efficient dental hygienist, the most creative digital designer, the top producing salesperson. And we tend to promote the people who are best in their individual producing jobs into leadership roles, and rarely are the same competencies that make you a great individual producer transferable to be a great leader. In fact, they're usually the opposite. Think about the talents that make a great salesperson. They rarely translate what makes a great sales leader. So I think organizations tend to promote the wrong people into leadership. Not always, but often. What they don't do, which they can start doing differently tomorrow, sit down, have a conversation. Say, hey, Joe, top salesperson 6 quarters in a row. We're thinking about grooming you for a leadership position. Let's talk about, is that the right role for you? Because the skills you have now, some of them will and some of them will not transfer over. Let's talk about the day in the life, a week in the life, a month in the life of a sales leader. Is this the right role for you? And I don't think that conversation happens enough.
No, I agree with you, because a lot of times it's like you're good at your job, but being good at your job doesn't mean you'll be good at the next job, right? Because the current job has, like you said, different competencies. What do you think, like what organizations, in your opinion, they get leadership right? Or what type of organizations do you kind of see?
Yeah, I think the ones that have these conversations, that they're very thoughtful and they're deliberate around what kind of career paths do we have? Because in most organizations, a lot of high-tech companies, the only way to get promoted, to earn more money, to move up the ladder is to lead people. It's very common in Silicon Valley, right? If you want to get promoted, you have to lead a people or have to lead a group of 10 people minimally. And so I think one is having different career paths, that some people can move up the organization and still be individual producers. They can be collaborators. They can be, perhaps team members that are making decisions that aren't responsible for hiring, firing, coaching, mentoring, giving high courage feedback. These are not skills that everybody has. So I think having two paths, multiple paths for success is important. And the thing I mentioned earlier, which is making sure that when you are grooming people for leadership, that they know what's expected, that they know what their contribution needs to be, but they also know what is the company going to invest in them. Joe, the Harvard Business Review did a research study a few years ago that said that the average age that someone receives their first promotion into a management role, age 30. Yet the average age when they receive their first formal leadership development training, age 42. That there is a scientific 12-year gap where people like me that are well-intended aren't trained, so they're wreaking havoc across cultures, right? And they're diminishing people, not because they're bad people, but because they're people that haven't been trained to be leaders. So multiple career paths. Second, crucial conversations around what it means to be a leader in this organization. And then third, here's how we're going to invest in you and develop new skills that you may not currently have that will make you a better leader. No one learns to be a leader overnight. You don't learn to be a leader by reading my book. It's trial and error, it's coaching, it's role-playing, conversation, saying the wrong thing, asking for forgiveness, declaring your intent, so many components that you learn over time. Nobody is born a leader. You're groomed to be a leader.
So now you say the first development is like 42 at 42. Is it long, or because is it one and done, or is it, hey, do they continuously go based on what you've researched?
Well, of course it's a process, right? I mean, like anything. I mean, as I look at some of my finest leadership moments, I'm 52. They probably were in the last 3 to 4 years. Some of my worst were in the earliest years. I mean, I've had thousands of high courage conversations with people, giving them feedback on their blind spots. The first 4 or 5 got me in trouble because I didn't do it right? I had high courage, but I had low consideration, low diplomacy. And the more mature I got, the more I understood what it's like to be on the receiving end of Scott Miller's feedback. It's tough. I'm tough. I'm tougher than I realize. And so I think it's absolutely a process with more reps, more practice, more coaching, more role playing. You're only going to improve.
Now, what are some quick things someone can really figure out to, like, hey, here's some things to, let's say you told someone you have 10 minutes to become a good leader. What would you kind of tell them? What would you tell them to do?
Yeah. Better balance your listening with your talking. That listening is quite selfless. Talking is quite selfish. Move off your own timeline. Move off your agenda. Move off your own frame of reference, and generally get into the other person's, field of experience. Second is declare your intent. I love this quote from one of our co-founders. Nearly all, if not all, conflict in life comes from mismatched or unfulfilled expectations. Declare your intent up front. Be very clear around what your agenda is, because lacking clarity, people make stuff up. Another one is to understand that in an organization, people are not your most valuable asset. It's not true. It's the relationships between your people that are the most valuable asset. Because Joe can be a genius and Scott can be a genius, but if we can't get along, collaborate, complement, forgive each other, forgive each other, then we're not valuable in the company. The last thing I would say is, as a leader, your job is to provide feedback. It's to constantly sit people down in the privacy of your office or on a walk and share with them insights into their own blind spots. Is really make sure that they understand they're saying this or they're doing that, or it appears that this is happening, so they can understand what is it like to work on a project with them. What's it like to work on a product launch with them, or a trade show with them, or be in a staff meeting with them, or be on a Zoom call with them? And the more feedback you can offer to your colleagues, the better they will trust you, be loyal to you, and improve their performance.
No, I think you hit some amazing points. Now, what are you still learning? Like, what's the next area of leadership you're still kind of going into, or trying to, because obviously you learned a lot these past 3-4 years, but what?
No, I got it all. It's all done. I got it.
Okay.
No,
I trust you. I
think the biggest thing I'm still learning is the power of humility in leadership. I'm a fairly charismatic guy, loud, brash, confident, and I've always thought earlier in life, those are the traits of strong leaders. Well, some of that may be true, but a lot of leaders are more retiring and quiet and deliberative and contemplative. So I've had to learn that the spotlight can't always be on me. I need to have an abundance mentality and turn the spotlight onto my colleagues. That my job as a leader is to not just demonstrate humility and vulnerability, but to be the model of that, right? To show it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. One of my favorite leadership books ever written is called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. Phenomenal book. And Liz Wiseman teaches that as a leader, your job is not to be the genius in the room, but rather to be the genius maker of others. and that all of us have diminishing tendencies, right? We're the rapid responder, we're the idea fountain, we're the person who's always on, or we're the optimist, and that we control the mood so much that nobody else can rise up and be the genius. That as the leader, your job is not to be the smartest person in the room. Even as the CEO, or as I was for 8 years, the chief marketing officer, I mistook the fact that my job was to be the most creative, the most well-run, the most talented. No, my job was to hire people who were smarter than me in their respective areas and not be intimidated by it, and lift them up in the organization and clear the political bureaucratic path when they needed my positional power, but me not try not to be the smartest person in all the areas of marketing. I came to learn that the hard way.
Okay. So Alice Martinez asked, what does humility look like in action? Right? Because how do you what example could you give of that?
First of all, recognize that humility is born out of confidence. Confident people are capable of being humble people. It's arrogant people that are incapable of being humble. I think humility means, in a metaphorical sense, you aren't at the front of the parade. You're at the back of the parade. It's that you're not the first person to speak in a meeting. Maybe you're the last. Instead of you sharing all of your ideas up front, you step back and listen to all the other ideas. That you are capable of not always announcing every project. You're not always on the stage of the town hall, that you're giving opportunities for others to step up as well. It doesn't mean that you become an empty suit or that you diminish yourself in the process. It's just that you don't have to always have the spotlight always on you. You take pride. You find delight, satisfaction, joy in the success of those around you. It doesn't mean that you're quiet, that you're meek, that you are a victim or a martyr. I mean, those words do not describe me. You've met me 8 minutes ago. None of that describes me. But people who lack humility, they suck all of the air out of the meeting. They provide no space for anybody else to offer great ideas. Humble people are great at asking questions. So what do you think? What's your idea? What's been your experience? I also think humility comes in reinvention and disruption. A lot of people, Joe, say, I've got 20 years of experience. No, you probably have 1 year repeated 19 times, if you're like most of us. So be thoughtful about not always having the answer, not always being the smartest person, but stepping back a little bit and letting some others' wisdom, their experience, bubble up.
No, I think that's absolutely amazing. Now, obviously now things are sort of changing. You're getting some people who are getting managerial positions earlier and sort of breaking the mold.
Yeah.
How do you identify like a young leader early? I've heard of, even positions of people who are, 20, 21 years old just because of the path they took. How do you identify them early?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, right? I think is do they have an abundance mindset? Do they like to work collaboratively? Do they like to be part of a team? Do they take pride in the success of those around them, or are they more jealous? And that's not meant to be a negative thing. I'm very jealous. I'm actually a fairly jealous person. I admit it. I had a mess around it, which is why I probably was not a very effective leader earlier in my career. So I think you're looking carefully at the types of people that are a little more deliberate. They're a little more contemplative. They don't rush to a solution, that they understand the difference between urgency and importance. Like for me, I love a good crisis. Joe, I do my best work in an urgent crisis. And if one doesn't exist, I'll cook one up. I'll elevate something that isn't crisis worthy to feel like a crisis, because it's when I do my best work, the adrenaline, the dopamine. The problem is then I create chaos amongst all my colleagues because I thrive in crisis well. So I think if you're looking at people to groom for leadership, you're looking for maybe a little bit unusual level of wisdom, someone who's coachable, someone who's open to feedback, that they're not naturally defensive, that they're curious, that they're inquisitive, that they want to disrupt themselves and maybe try something new. By the way, the opposite of those talents doesn't mean you're a bad person. The opposite of inquisition might be fierce focus on one particular thing. The opposite of someone who likes to be disrupted might be someone who loves consistency. A lot of people would love to have an executive assistant who wants to be an executive assistant for 20 years. So there's some roles that are actually better suited for people who don't have these leadership capabilities or leadership desires.
Is it common, because you mentioned the two paths, right? That they should, because right now it's like you have to be in a certain position if you want growth in your career.
Yeah.
And the two path is a solution where if you have people grow into certain positions where they're experts. Have you seen organizations really start that? Because I mean, it is very new, right? I've never seen it. I mean, but I haven't seen much either.
I think it depends on the kind of organization, the kind of industry, right? In most sales organizations, salespeople don't often want to be a sales leader, right? They want to have an uncapped income ability, right? No cap on my commission. I eat what I kill, so to speak, right? So I think in a lot of sales organizations, the career track is just more income because you're earning more, you're selling more. I think in a lot of organizations, the path to sales leadership is difficult because most sales leaders aren't naturally making more money than the team members reporting to them. And the number one reason people go into sales is to have control over their income. So a lot of organizations, they have to have a path to make it viable for your high producing salesperson to want to move out of that role and become a sales leader where perhaps you're not making as much. I think a lot of the models are player coach, right? A sales leader has their own nut and they also have to lead the nuts of others, so to speak. But then you have some competition going on. It's difficult. I think it's the thoughtful organization that is also large enough where they can create career opportunities for people to have multiple careers in the company. That may not be a vertical ascent. It might be a more of a horizontal opportunity to try different things, because not everyone's looking to be promoted for a new title. A lot of people just want new opportunities. So it's requires you to be a larger organization where people can fulfill multiple career paths in your company. I think starting with the dialogue, right, is a leader's job is to sit down, listen to their team members. What are your passions? What are your concerns? What are your fears? What are your desires? What are your dreams? What kind of career's next for you? How can I help you? How can I help you accomplish it here? Or if not here, how can it be somewhere else? That your exit doesn't mean we're done. Your exit means that perhaps we're launching you to something new and something better, and maybe you bring those skills back to this company in a new role later on. There's so many ways to tackle that challenge if you genuinely have that person's best interest at heart.
Who are some of your favorite leaders that you've come across, and do you share a story or two about them that kind of shows wow, this is something that wowed you?
Well, I think a lot of the leaders in the Franklin Covey company, I'll mention two. One of my first leaders was Bill Bennett. He really was the transition figure in my career. Took me from being a six-figure salesperson to a significant figure sales leader. It was an interesting promotion for me, a unique promotion where I earned more money. And I became a general manager, managing about 17 salespeople in Chicago, big office, a skyscraper, kind of every sales leader's dream. And one day, Bill came to my office and sat me down and said, "Scott, you're standing at a gas station and you're holding a match." And he sat me down and he talked to me about some of the things I was doing that were disappointing him. I was gossiping. I wasn't holding confidences. I was a little bit of a loose lips leader. And he really had a high courage face-to-face conversations. Stop doing this or else. Start doing this and this will happen. And so he had the courage to stop me in my tracks. Another example is Franklin Covey's CEO, Bob Whitman. Now, you'd think the CEO of a leadership company would be a great leader, and he is. Bob has a little bit of a more calm style. He's kind of the opposite of me. He's a little more quiet, a little more retiring, and he kind of likes you to kind of telepathically know what he wants from you, right? He doesn't love conflict. And so once Bob Whitman took me aside after a meeting and said to me, uncharacteristically, "Scott, you make too many declarative statements." That was it. There was no examples. There was no context, but I thought about it. Basically what he was saying is, "Scott, you have an answer for everything. You never shut up, and I wish you would just listen more." He didn't say that. He didn't have to. So the fact that he said to me, "Scott, you make too many declarative statements help me to be a little more thoughtful, not always jump in, not always try to sway everybody over to my agenda, be a little more open to somebody else's agenda. And I think it's the consistency is those two people were willing to talk straight to me about my blind spots.
Now, another thing about being a leader is you have to be able to take feedback, right? And taking feedback is not easy, right? Because someone tells you, "Hey, Scott, you need to shut up," right? How does someone get better at that?
Oh, it's practice again. I mean, like you, I host a radio program, a podcast, I write books. I'm an ink columnist. I get feedback all day long. People commenting on my hair, my glasses. There's like blogs dedicated to my hair.
You have good hair.
I got crazy hair. I get a haircut. Thank you. I think it's practice. I think not all feedback is helpful. Some feedback isn't about you. It's about somebody's ex-husband who acts like you, or someone's ex-boss who looks like you or sounds like you. So some feedback isn't about you. The more you identify trusted people in your career, in your life, where you know they have your best interest at heart, that's whose feedback you should seek. Now, you shouldn't just seek feedback from people who are your supporters. I love to get feedback from people who don't like me, because that's harsh feedback, and I can kind of like wade through it to figure out what should I take away. But lots of times when I get feedback, Joe, I'll separate what is someone's feelings, their emotions, and their opinions versus someone sharing facts. Scott, you said this. Scott, you did this. That's different than, I was in a meeting last week and I kind of felt diminished by you. I know. I mean, that's valuable, but I don't know. Can you tell me more? I mean, what did I say? What did I do? Here's the big idea. If you want to improve your self-awareness, which is the key to every effective person, right? Increasing your own self-awareness. Be open to feedback, but you've got to make it safe for others to tell you their truth, which means when someone does give you feedback, when you solicit feedback, don't refute it. Don't deny it. Don't dispute it. Don't try to talk it away. Well, yeah, there was a crazy day and I was late. And Deborah always talks so much. No. None of that. Write it down. Thank them for the feedback. And if necessary, ask some clarifying questions. So, Tim, when I do that in meetings, what do you think is going on with me? Do I seem insecure? Do I seem intimidated? Do I seem rushed or jealous? Use those words. Use those words. Give people permission to say, as a matter of fact, Scott, you do seem jealous. If you give people the license to use some words, it might be the word they wanted to use with you for the last 5 years, but they never felt permission.
Now, this situation is very different because a lot of work is remote, and that has changed, right? Because in person, some things come across very differently than through email or through the phone or through video call. What do leaders need to be aware of during this time?
Joe, do you mean with respect to giving feedback or just the new leadership style?
New leadership style, or incorporating existing styles into a new way of doing things.
I'd share a couple of thoughts with you. One is I was privileged to co-author a second book called Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team. That book debuted as a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And the first practice is develop a leader's mindset. And this is the leader's mindset. It used to be that the leader's mindset was all things come through me. My job is to get everything done. Typically because you were an independent producer. The effective new leader's mindset is I get work done with and through other people. I get work done with and through other people. Well, when that's your mindset, you become a coach, a mentor, more patient. You slow down. You don't critique ever for diminishment. You critique for learning. You give redirecting feedback and reinforcing feedback. When you believe that your job is to get work done with and through other people, even virtually, then you start to realize I can treat everyone differently and still treat everyone fairly, because everybody likes feedback differently. Everyone likes to have a different kind of relationship with your boss. Some want to, share their intimate problems. Others don't want to share anything in your life. But I think my best advice early on is realize that your job is to get work done with and through other people. And when it comes to this new virtual environment, also have the mindset that your job is to check in, not check on. So when someone is being checked in with, the conversation is different. The words are different. The mood is different. When someone's being checked on, they know it a couple of syllables into the Zoom call or the conference call. So check your intent before you work with your team members. And ideally, it's always virtually now, right? Because people are craving the interaction. You can tell a lot about someone from looking at how they're looking and how they're feeling. Check in, don't check on. And to my previous point around humility and vulnerability, admit that it's a struggle. As the leader, admit that your kids are driving you crazy in the house. Admit that you're having difficulty focusing. Admit that you're scared, that you're restless. When you give permission for others to be vulnerable back to you, the bond you build is unbreakable in organizations.
Wow. Thank you so much. I just want to say sorry for the audience. We would have had an extra 30 minutes. You know what happened? So I have a LinkedIn Live tomorrow, and that person said, hey, can we move it to 3? And I was like, oh, so I thought that was you. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I went and I see, and it was like, hey, you get the dreaded, oh, we were scheduled. And I was like, oh no. And then quickly, but thank you for,
it was no problem.
Thank you for being so understanding. We could definitely do this again. FYI, for anybody in the audience, this is the book that he wrote. And look, he sent me an autograph, so I have a special copy.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Look at that.
You deserve it. Own your mess.
Management mess to leadership success. And I think it's just something that I think it's being explored more so often now, because you see that these organizations, people don't stay. And a lot of times, right? I feel like one thing is that businesses need to read self-help books, because it's always like, hey, the employees are probably, we can't find good people. We can't do this. But a lot of times it's like, hey, what can they do to make things better? And it's stuff like that.
Well said.
And I think, thank you for, publishing books like this that, like I said, people need this. And I think there are people who are realizing this and sort of learning from this. So, I know you have a meeting in 1 minute. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to having this conversation again. And I still got to finish up the book, but you'll get an email from me.
Thank you. I'll come back anytime you'll have me. I appreciate it. Have a great week. Stay safe.
All right. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You can just X out the browser. So yeah, thank you for everyone who watched. Sorry for that. Let me just kind of answer. Work from home has changed everything. I just want to thank all the people. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mawish. If you're still watching, Jazbeer, Tartil, Fahad. Thank you, Matab. Thank you, Philip Rizzo. A leader must know human nature, be bound by a code of ethics, possess a sense of duty and morality. Which one of these does your guess? I believe he feels all of them are important, right? They all incorporate. And if all geniuses are together, it becomes a conflict. Yes, you get egos fighting each other, so that makes it tough. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Andrew, for your wonderful comments. You gotta listen. If you're thinking about your next comment, all the things that are coming to you are just going in one year out the other. And thank you, Alice, for your question. Imtiaz, sorry, sustainable. I believe, like I said, you have to have a sustainable style or else you will have people leave. Where did I find him? He found me. So, I got lucky. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Hannah. Again, thank you, Andrew. Mark, I appreciate your comment. Hassan from New Jersey, nice to see you. And I think Tartil will kind of explore young leadership. Leadership is a combination of skill and age. I believe so, that there are a lot of things. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brenda, for joining. Thank you, all of you, for your wonderful questions. Which John did you look at? John Lindsay. John L. I acknowledge John L. There's another John. I'll acknowledge him too. But thank you, Daniel, for all your help. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll be going now. I got some work to do, got some things to catch up on. As always, I'm a message away. If you need the link to the book, send me a message. I'll get it to you. It's definitely worth the read. I'm currently reading it. I would highly recommend it. So thank each and every one of you. I appreciate you. You have a good one. Bye-bye.